You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
Before we get into today's episode, I want to tell you a little bit about our current sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. As you well know, if you've been following This is Oklahoma, they've been a huge part of this podcast. So this podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling an Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Also, for the podcast, a new sponsor this year that's just come on board and super excited to announce RCB Bank. Since 1936, RCB Bank has offered progressive products and a friendly service. Come in today to find out more about their loan promotion on new, used, refinance cars, boats, campers, and ATVs. Visit RCB Bank to learn more. RCB Bank, that's my bank, with approved credit. Restrictions apply. Now, let's get into today's episode. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode down at the Bedford studio in Oklahoma City with Matt Thomas today to talk about, I guess, some construction stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on the podcast. Excited to dive into, to the world that you live in. And I'm sure it's been pretty crazy, last couple of years as well, but also in last 10, I would say, with Oklahoma City kind of growing and growing and growing. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about you. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in Chickasha, Oklahoma. So just about 45 miles just southwest of here. Actually had lunch with my father just before coming here.
Yeah.
So, it's home, and it's always been part of my roots.
Yeah. So grew up out there, family farm, stuff like that?
Yes. Grew up on a family farm. Worked every summer, all of my off time. And, it's kind of one of those things when you're a farmer, you don't ever complain about things. But I can tell you that there's a very specific memory for me that I'll never forget. We were having one summer working cattle, and it was just so hot, like typical Oklahoma hot summers. And we were doing all the things you do with young calves, branding them, lots of other very unclean things, if you will. Yeah. And I remember
all the fun stuff.
Yeah. And I remember almost passing out from heat exhaustion. And I told my father, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And he said, well, we're going to figure that out then, son. Yeah. So we did.
So you I need to get a degree and go into the world, farm is generational, right? I'm sure he was thinking, hey, I've got someone to rely on and take this farm further and further.
That's exactly right. We, our families had the farm for 2 generations in Chickasha, and my father and his father, John Harper Thomas. And then, but my great-great-grandfather had a really large ranch, southwest Oklahoma, George Thomas, and he's even donated some of that to the Boy Scouts of Oklahoma, the Last Frontier Boy Scouts. Camp George Thomas is
that's really cool.
Really kind of some of our family
deep
history.
Roots then, a lot of family history. So growing up, your brothers and sisters involved in the family business as well?
Not necessarily. I've got younger brother, younger sister. Younger brother lives at home, small learning disability, but works really hard on the farm. And then my sister is actually a PT in Tulsa.
Okay.
And so she's the medical side of the group.
Yeah. So I guess now when you go back to the farm and go back to see mom and dad and hang out, it's more of a release rather than back in the day, you're grinding sun up to sundown.
I definitely don't get enlisted anymore, and that's a great thing. I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, no doubt. So when you basically say to dad, I don't think I want to do this for the rest of my life, how old are you, and then where do you go from there?
That was probably when I was about 12 or 13, somewhere in there, and so we talked about my skill set and where I should go. I had a pretty strong engineering mindset even at that age, so I went to ultimately to Oklahoma State University. I originally went for an electrical engineering degree and realized pretty quickly I would spend a lot of time in offices and cubicles and not enjoying all the outdoor stuff that I enjoyed as a kid, even if I didn't choose that lifestyle.
Yeah. You realize what you missed.
That's exactly right. I figured out the other side. And so I called home one day and told my father, I'm not sure if I can do this. And he said, well, you're in college. You better figure it out. You're a grown man now. And so we talked about it for a while, and construction management was the degree program I ultimately selected. And a couple years later, I graduated with, 2004 now.
Yeah. So growing up, did you go through like the FFA stuff, or did you realize early on that you're like, I don't want to do this anyway, so I'm not going to worry about it? And
Yeah,
that's
I didn't really do that. I did a lot
thing.
more of the. I participated in a lot of the more core engineering things. That was kind of more my interest level than necessarily do I win awards in competitions.
Gotcha.
That wasn't my thing.
Yeah. So go to Stillwater, having a great time. You change to do construction management. Like, what's kind of like Oklahoma City and Stillwater like when you graduate? Then is there many jobs out? 2004. I mean, obviously we had the 2008, 09 was not fun for a lot of people, businesses and stuff. But kind of what was it like when you came out?
I'd interned with a company out of Chickasha, CMS Willowbrook, and ultimately accepted a job with them. We did a lot of the work up in Deer Creek area the first couple of years when I graduated. I literally went from an internship straight into getting a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate for that.
Oh, for sure. That's a great learning experience. And then to know you have a job at the end of it, which I'm sure there's a lot of people who are coming out of school this year, last year, that are struggling to even find internships.
Very much so. So as I was saying, we got into doing a lot of the work up in the Deer Creek area. That was a really neat experience, seeing schools come together. And then I got involved in several projects for the state of Oklahoma, Office of Attorney General's building, Judicial Center, two pretty big prominent buildings on the south side of the state capitol complex. And those were kind of the anchors for me understanding larger complexity projects. And that kind of led me to think about what my next paths in life might be, because it's one thing when you're building a school, you've got a lot of very simple things you're trying to think through, but you start getting into large historic preservation buildings, you start getting very complex.
Yeah. I mean, the state capitol is still under renovation, right? It's been going on for a long time.
I'm not sure what phase they're on to now, but yeah,
it's a
you're
long
exactly
phase,
right.
isn't
That's
it?
right.
Yeah. I remember, I think, sent a couple of messages and talked to a few people there, and they're like, yeah, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Well, good for you. It'll look great when it's done.
Exactly.
I did a podcast down there with Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell, and we walked through like 4 construction areas to get to his office. It's like, how do you deal with this noise every single day?
Like I said, just next phase.
Next phase. They'll be away from me at some point. They'll be at the other point of the building.
About the time he retires.
Yeah. That must be really cool, though, to dive into like historical buildings and okay, if it's a 100-year-old building, which is quite a lot, in Oklahoma, there's not many of them. That's cool to look back, isn't it? Like, and see those stuff and the history that goes on. And
there's a lot of neat architecture here in Oklahoma City that people gloss over. Some of the neat buildings there at the Capitol include buildings designed by Solomon Layton, which he has historic buildings all over town, and you can just see some of his architecture that really shines through in some of the real kind of core municipality buildings that exist.
So when you do that, you see the construction side, are you piqued, like your interest piqued by the kind of architectural side of things and the creativity from that side as well?
For me personally, I think that what I started getting my figuring out what my itch that needed to be scratched was complexity. I liked things that were required as much mental intellect as possible to plan a plan, to come up with a good strategy and work through that. And that kind of became my challenge going forward, was how do I come to the next more complex challenge to keep me interested. The other ones that weren't complex were just, they just bought the time to the next one.
Just fills the gap. But then you get one that you're like, okay, like this requires my full attention.
And it's a challenge, and that becomes fun to accomplish the challenge.
Right, no doubt, especially like if you're an engineer brain and you like to work things out and you're probably very good at math and just, all that. I'm terrible at math. So being an engineer would be miserable for me, and I don't think I'm very good at organizing many people together either, so that wouldn't be fun.
That is
project based.
That's exactly what trips my trigger now. So it's fun seeing projects come along that are things that other people have passed on that give me the opportunity to say, well, let's figure out a way to pull that off. And
does that happen quite a lot then?
It happens more often than you think. There are, with the boom in construction, that has happened really even in the last 60 days. It's really picked up a lot. There's a lot of people that are doing construction that either don't have the experience for it, they're novices to it, and so it's pretty easy to get in over your head. We've got all kinds of really interesting nuances just literally right now with material lead times affected by COVID, cost escalations. So if you were playing a chessboard, it became three-dimensional even in the last 30 days, more than normal.
You're right, it's crazy. And I guess if people signed contracts and they didn't put in the clauses for the labor, the material price to go up, and their profit's gone. Or even worse, it's you're paying them to work for them, right?
No, you're exactly right. And there's also clients of ours that are nonprofit clients that where we may have, say, a year ago, helped put together a budget and a plan for a project, and now they've gone through fundraising through the toughest time of the world through 2020's COVID drills, and now they're wondering, are those numbers still sound? So it's a very difficult thing to kind of keep all those plates spinning and give confidence to them all.
So you're with this company that you get your internship with, and I guess you just start like climbing the ladder and finding projects to do and working your way up. And
I worked for several years there, and then I went to a large national construction firm, and I spent about 4 years there. And primarily, I thought that'd be a neat learning experience to see what the national side of construction would be like. And I found out pretty quickly that the corporate environment wasn't something I was really accustomed to, and climbing the ladder was going to be really hard.
Yeah.
But I did see quite quickly that they had a wealth of knowledge that was great for me to soak up. And so I kind of call that some of my earliest training years post graduation from college. And so sometime near the end of my fourth year at that firm, I realized that it was time to start thinking about, again, my next chapter. And I reached out to an interior designer friend of mine, Vicki Van Stavern, and told her what I was looking to do. And she said, I think I need to connect you with James Pickel, and let's see if there's maybe something that might happen over there. And I got an interview and a job offer within days, and went to work for Smith and Pickel. Yeah. And I was thrown right into the middle of Chesapeake campus, which is awesome. That was quite an experience.
Yeah, right. That's the one that's obviously in kind of off 63rd and South 63rd Street, and where they're still building now. I mean, there's something going on across the street which is going up, right?
That's right, on the west side of Western there. That there's
giant crane that's always there every day, and
there's multifamily going in now. There's a hotel, which is all somewhat evolution of a lot of the earlier plans by Mr. McClendon, but. So we dived into some really wild construction years at Chesapeake, where the buildings that they were commissioning were large, extravagant, complex, all things that really made it interesting and challenging for me. And I know I didn't sleep much back then, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was some of the best years of my life in the construction world. Yeah,
because you get to the end of the project and you're like, now there's this kick-ass building that we have, right? Yeah. That like is the city loves this building. Do you guys have much to do with the boathouse district?
We have built several of the projects down there.
I thought so.
Including Finish Line Tower.
Yeah.
So we've been anchors in that side of the world as well.
Which stuff like that stands out, right? Because you might go down there, or you see pictures of people that you never met, and they have their wedding photos in front of it. Like, that's cool, isn't it? With all the glass and downtown, and I'm sure it's fun, obviously, to just see the finishing product. But I'm sure it's probably better when you have a builder or someone who's commissioned you to do this that wants to take a little bit of a risk and build something that's not your average cookie cutter office building, right? Like that.
Absolutely.
That's, like I said, it's a challenge. Is there any that really stand out like that were just kind of super? I mean, other than the Boathouse District, that were like one-offs that you've like, we've never done this before yet, but let's give it a go.
Yes and no. I'll answer that in two ways. Several of the projects that we've done, even in the last 10 years, have been complex, no doubt. Mm-hmm. One of the largest ones we did at the Chesapeake campus was their central plant and data center, and it was just extremely fast, extremely complex. There's so much hidden inside this one little building that... I could go on for literally an hour just telling you about all the little small parts that make it a special building. But that was interesting and great. But the things that really have been more intriguing to me as that's kind of evolved in my world has been ones that have had real strong community impact. In the last year, we finished, right before COVID happened, the Oklahoma Contemporary Arts Center off of Broadway. A building with no right corners in it, with a completely new design for an
Totally
exterior.
off the wall, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, we ran through so much testing on that just to prove that it wasn't going to shake itself to the ground. You know, just
Right.
that was a wonderful experience in itself, because even after doing the complex project, we were returning something back to the community. It was something that people were going to enjoy, just like your connection with things off the Boathouse District.
Yeah.
This is an education facility, and it's also an art appreciation facility, and it's just so many more things that I definitely saw the appreciation of giving back and what that influence to community and culture is.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's so cool, isn't it, to see that building? I mean, people they might not even know who built it, but just to know that they appreciate it means a lot, right? You don't have to have a big Smith Pickel logo on the side of it for people to, you know, call you up and say you did a good job. But, you know, it's cool, isn't it, for people to, and they've done a great job of putting it, so it's in a great location. You know, it's just, I mean, to have a board or whatever that wants to put a building like that in, I mean, it takes some, you know, bending some heads, right? Because there's going to be some people who are just like, nah. It's hard, you know, we don't want to do it. It costs too much money, you know, but it's something that's going to stand out when you drive down Broadway.
And I think the excitement that will happen in the coming times is they've just now opened up to the public for a lot of their camps and things of that nature. And of course, it looks like we may be on the downward trend from the COVID restrictions, but when that opens its doors fully and can be appreciated for what it is and what it's meant to bring, that will be a special moment. I mean, my daughter is enrolled in some classes out there this summer, so that's a personal connection
really cool.
point, again, to see that happen and see her experience that firsthand.
Does she have any desires to get into the construction side of things or architectural side of things?
No, none whatsoever so far.
None?
Yeah, no. She's my little art at heart kind of girl. So
okay.
We'll see where that goes.
So she's definitely gifted with drawings and art side of things?
Very much so, I would say, in the performance side. She loves that. So I think she's taking a costume design class or something like that. So it's going to be neat to see her.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, maybe performing in a building that you guys have built would be really cool, right?
That would be really neat.
Yeah.
It's full circle.
I mean, it's great, the fact that, like, you're born and raised, you know, in Oklahoma, and you have this impact, because I'm sure there's nothing worse than flying out of state, building a building, and it looks amazing, but you never, ever get to see that impact.
I've been on a couple projects where the impact has never been felt, and that feels real transactional, and you know, you still put as much care and thought into it at the end of the day, making sure all the things work the way they're supposed to, and you know that there's never outstanding issues, or even that, you know, you check in with them from time to time, make sure everything's going okay, but it's just not the same.
Right.
It's something special when you're building for your community.
Yeah.
And you know that your reputation's on the line when you're doing that. And
for sure, yeah. So what are the buildings or places that you guys have, you know, done that people would recognize in Oklahoma City?
Well, a couple.
I know there's a long list. But, you know, standout ones, I guess.
No doubt. Like on Lake Hefner Parkway on the west side, Hearts for Hearing has a great facility we constructed a couple years ago, which that's its own little story, but it's amazing to think that they went from renting a small little facility over by Integris to needing a facility that they could grow into, and then now they've completely grown out of that facility. So again,
that's
great
really
story
cool.
to see local people doing amazing things. You know, we talked about the Boathouse District and the impacts that's had. The nonprofit community has really been a large cornerstone of Smith and Pickel's work over the years, and we have definitely tried to help several other organizations. New View Oklahoma, which is the former Oklahoma League for the Blind, they have facilities off of 5th and Douglas and off of 33rd and Classen, and we've worked in both of those. And it's amazing seeing, again, just the things that you're helping impact for people that, you know, literally need a facility that's kind of tailored to their needs. And that's what's really kind of neat about even their 33rd and Classen facility, is that it has training components to it to help people that don't know how to deal with being blind, or maybe recently losing their vision, things of that nature. So
little intricacies that not just on the outside, but the stuff on the inside that's of real need and value and a service as well that you've got to build into, right?
Exactly. And, outside of the nonprofit world, we've done a lot of work for the educational sector. Like right now, we're building a lot of work for Metro Technology Centers. That's really neat, again, seeing all those things that we are able to do to connect back to the community. And one of the really kind of sidebar pieces to that is that there's not a lot of people choosing construction as their trade.
Right.
And Metro Tech is one of those few organizations that are really working hard to try and bring people back into the construction community. So it's neat seeing that, here we are as a firm that builds, that employs people that are passionate about what they do, but we're struggling to get people engaged, and yet now we're building facilities for people that are helping engage people, and knowing that maybe these two things that we're doing together eventually will meet in the middle is a really neat thing to see come together.
No, and I mean, to that point, right, you're right. Like I don't know anyone who's in school right now that thinks, I want to go and be in construction management or be an electrical engineer or like the trade stuff. There is a need for it, and there's going to be an increasing need for it as we keep going on, right? That's a big issue.
Well, we still have cars, we still drive down roads, we still have buildings that we need to stay, sheltered from the sun from. I mean, housing construction's booming right now too, and it has for months. But there's buildings. There's an interesting piece to them that a lot of people don't think about, and that's that they have to be lived in and maintained. Even like the building we're in right now, if we just turned the lights off and left it for, 4 or 5 months and then came back, we'd find that it's trying to fall apart on its own.
Yeah.
Just because these things are built for us to operate within and to function within, and they need us to take care of them. And ultimately, with as much people that live in Oklahoma City and all the facilities that exist, we have to just continue to keep that box checked, keep working on them.
Not to mention the adverse weather that we keep having.
Oh my, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
How was that?
A little funny thing, my wife has harassed me for years about putting a storm shelter in.
Yeah.
And we don't even have one at the house. And she's from Kansas, and they have tornadoes up there too. And, I've always said, it's important for everyone to have one, but yet I don't have one myself.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because, I know growing up when I was young, we would stand out on the back porch and watch tornadoes go by. And we've definitely dodged a few over the years. But, the weather that is in Oklahoma is literally every season that you can pretty much get. This last year we hit some of the coldest temperatures that we've ever had. And, go back 2 years, we've had some of the hottest. So that challenges us on every front, but that also makes sure that we stay on our toes for using the right products and thinking through all these building envelopes correctly, and things are sealed like they should be. And again, it makes it fun to do what we do. Yeah,
because I guess people who don't really understand construction don't probably get that, like, materials expand and contract during heat.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you've got to build in for that.
Exactly.
Which is, that's when you're living in Oklahoma and the weather changes all the time, like, that's a legit need, especially when it's, 90 degrees one day and literally the next day it's 30 and blowing 20 out the north.
When we built Heart for Hearing, their facility, one of the funny stories about that was they wanted it to be extremely quiet, which obviously they're working to try and help with people who have hearing disabilities. And so when it was designed and built, we took all kinds of precautions to make sure that box was checked. And when it was done, it was a great, quiet facility. And then I started getting phone calls about every morning about 10 o'clock, the building would make this weird noise. And so we started going by and trying to pay attention at the same time frame, and figured out that it was the building thermally expanding. Yeah. And so we were able to work through some of those. But you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, that metal expands in heat. It's just like roads buckling in California.
Right.
You got to plan for that stuff.
And that's part of it, isn't it? That's part of what makes it interesting and what makes you want to come to work every day and figure stuff out.
Because you'll learn something new.
Yeah, and then that probably was the first time that happened, that make noises, right? Kind of like a tree cracking.
Exactly.
Just like, But it's funny that it kind of happens around 10 a.m. every day.
The sun coming out and starting to warm all the metals up that had gotten cold overnight.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm sure that's super interesting to have, those little things that you have to, you have to get through those things, right? That's a big need for that, for the building and the people who are in it. It's like, we want to make this quiet, and then you've got this random noise happening around 10 every day.
Yeah. Best laid plans, right?
Yeah.
You do your best.
So with, obviously I'm in the real estate world, so yeah, housing market's been crazy recently, but it's interesting that it's also in the construction, like the commercial side as well, right? That's kind of interesting to have both, and people building stuff, and especially with, I guess, COVID happening and nobody really wanting retail space, but more distribution and industrial space is kind of growing as well. Like, how has that been, from your side, and what do you see trending and stuff like that?
Great questions. So last year was obviously nothing anyone could have predicted,
right.
But we saw a lot of the private sector clients that we were working with, everything from retail to office, really just completely hit pause or stop. They saw that there were an inability to get financing, B, concern on whether or not things would rent or make any money. And so, we had some public partners that were great clients to have during that, and that persisted and kept us going through a lot of those really tough times. Since then, it's been interesting to kind of see the grumbling of growth want to happen.
Yeah.
January this year, I was really still pretty concerned off of last year. It was really tough to tell, would we see any specific market sector come back faster than another? You said a second ago, industrial kept going, and we can relate to, Amazon deliveries and all these other little kind of infrastructure-related things that just kept on going behind the scenes in a, batten down the hatches at home approach. What is, I think, still remains to be seen going forward, will we see stuff like office return to a level like it was? I think there's definitely a desire for social interaction that went away that's going to come back with fury probably, and allow for a lot of these mixed use facilities to really kind of prosper, because that'll allow for all of the retail and the social interaction and the restaurant and all that to really just kind of play together. I don't know. I think that there's things that we all could hope for. We really would like to see more of the medical kind of kick off, and I think that that'll be the next kind of big thing. But again, excuse me. But from a cultural standpoint, I'd love to see almost all of these things I've talked about that have been really fun things, like our nonprofit work. They've all related to things that require social interaction. So it's kind of like we got to see all those happen again to allow businesses to thrive, to allow them to donate, to allow all of that to philanthropy growth to occur again.
Yeah. And it seems like Oklahoma City, just does a really good job of that, right? There's just a giving. People do. And I never realized that until I got here. And I was here probably a few years until I really understood it. But it was just like, we're just nice people, right? Like, people want to help and want to give and want to it's not like you have an issue, I don't want anything to do with it. It's more like, how can I help? What do you need? And, and that's through every level, right? That's from just someone walking down the street to you guys making a huge building or building a building and making a legit impact.
Completely agree. And, Oklahoma City is so big compared to a lot of metropolitan areas, so spread out. We live on the northwest side of town, and there's times that you feel like you're disconnected from the rest. So it's, that a lot of these things help draw and pull everyone together, and that is fun to know that all those things are so interconnected at a societal level. That's fun to be part of.
You mentioned mixed use, like places like Chisholm Creek, and I guess the new spot that's going up across the street from is it on Broadway? There's the Chicken and Pickles at, right? There's all these places that are popping up now that are like, all continuing to be developed. They're like, oh, this is actually bringing people out, and people are getting the vaccine and comfortable now to come and hang out and socially interact.
Great point. Chisholm Creek was one of the properties we helped develop. Everything around the pond up there, and that's off of Western and Memorial. And when it all came together in its first couple phases, it was fun to see the excitement level with it. Yeah. And then, of course, last year to watch it just literally, it was like turning the volume off and hear the water still splashing on the pond, but nobody's there enjoying it.
Right.
But I ate lunch over there today at Firebirds, and you could just kind of feel that underlying energy is starting to build back up. And that's exciting to me because, a lot of these things that we've done on these projects have been unique, but they need people to appreciate them. Like even the water feature up there, that was a complicated thing to get it built, and it was originally synchronized to music, and so we got all that done, and everyone enjoys it for a year, and then it all goes quiet.
And it has like fancy lights and stuff, and it looked really cool. The Point, right? Is that what it was called?
Yep.
Yeah. And I remember seeing the drawings for it. I was like, whoa, this is like I haven't seen anything like this in Oklahoma City, and you hope that, some national chains are going to come in, or someone's going to come in and like make sure it's, people want to come to it, right? You're trying to create this building, this plot of land that draws attention from big time businesses that want to come in and hang out and bring people in. And there's nothing more that excites people than, like, I think we used to joke that In-N-Out's coming, right?
Right.
Like In-N-Out's going to come to Chisholm Creek, and people are like, no, really? Like, well, we're talking. They're legit on the line, but it's just that opportunity to have big brands like that and bring people in, and to have a place to hang out. Like, who doesn't want more places to go hang out outside, right? On a great patio with water features, and they've had concerts out there too, and they've had cycle bar classes in the what is it, I can't remember the exact word for it is, but that place, you got a kind of a stage on the water, right? And there's like seating area, amphitheater, I guess would be the word for it. That's really cool, isn't it? And hopefully you're right, people do start going out and using it, and you get to see more people. You can get to go out and hang out there yourself.
I think we're already seeing it again. So it's just exciting to see that energy build.
Yeah, no doubt. So what, coming up, I guess, what are you working on right now, and what are you excited about that's coming? Anything you're allowed to talk about?
Oh, there's always a lot cooking in the background, but, we've traditionally had a lot of repeat clients that we have worked really hard to maintain. And, over the years, you build and establish relationships. Some stay forever, some may fade away and then come back. Some of our greatest success stories come from some of those. So we've got some upcoming work at Cassidy School, Oklahoma Christian, big organizations that we've worked for 20, 30 plus years. We just broke ground on a 3-story healthplex on Memorial and Lake Hefner Parkway on the southeast corner, pain management, and that is that's fun because that's something that's not coming from any of the big organizations. That's all privately funded. Because in the last year, you've seen a lot of the groups like Integris and Mercy. They've all reduced manpower and throttled back, and they're trying to restart all those elective things again. And so it'll be interesting to see them kind of get back in the swing of all that work. But seeing that the private funding's jumping out in front of it just kind of tells you
that's good.
Yeah, it's all restarting.
So. Is there anything, I guess, buildings that you haven't built yet that, like, a type of building that you just can't wait to get your hands on? Like, you guys have done a lot of glass, a lot of metal work. It looks amazing. Obviously, the art center looks really cool. But is there anything else that stands out that's like, I'd love to build something like that?
I've thought about that, and that's a hard question even for me to answer because I've touched a lot of different market sectors and building types. But I think I've kind of reached a point in my career where I'm starting to actually get real enjoyment out of bringing other construction builders into that fold where they're seeing the things that have been fun for me. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't be anywhere today without all the people that have helped been part of my story. And this is an absolute shout out to all of them that they make this all work. Every project manager, superintendent, guy literally shoveling dirt. I mean, it's all a big team process. So what's been fun for me is kind of seeing my own personal leadership skills evolve and bringing a joy in some of these similar things to other people.
Yeah.
So we can all do it together. And that's a,
yeah.
I would say in the last year I've found more joy in that than even some specific project like, you know, could I build the biggest windmill or something? Well, that might be neat for a moment, but but again, personally, cultural impact is probably my biggest box checker.
I guess to the leadership point, then, what, you know, how do you continually kind of improve that, evolve on it? I mean, you read a lot of books. Like, I mean, that's something that's like, it's a lot of it's learned experience that you have to be thrown in the deep end and figure things out, and be around great mentors as well. Mm-hmm. But there's two elements to it too, right? You can't, you know, you could get stale and be like, oh, I've always done it this way. This is the way that I'm always going to do it, and people have to listen to me, and then things, you know, can go south real fast.
No doubt. And I would absolutely step out front and first say that I've made plenty of mistakes along the way, and I don't think that I'd be anywhere without learning from some of those. You know, I feel like sometimes I repeat a couple that I should have learned the first time.
I think I've done this before. Why does this feel familiar?
Yeah, it feels way too familiar. But, you know, outside of that, I've always got a open door approach at the office to where I'm never hiding from an issue. I'd rather know about it and help problem solve it with the team than let them feel like they're working within a box on it. Yeah. So we spend a lot of time doing either one-on-one or multiple people problem solving individual situations, so that we feel like there's never you're never left on a plateau by yourself. Because ultimately, the organization like we've got, there's a lot of individual corners of leaders that are doing a certain batch of tasks, and they have to, you know, whether it's coordinate equipment, coordinate resources. I mean, even as much as we think Oklahoma City is a big town, a lot of these trade contractors that we work with and treasure may work on, you know, this superintendent's job site in the morning and that other one's in the afternoon. And so keeping all that communication level really high is one of the things that helps make us successful versus just individual management that no one talks to each other.
Right.
So we work hard on that.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, communication is key, isn't it, at every level? One thing I thought of, do you guys, has it been more of a focus on like the way environmentally, like how you build buildings now, like you've noticed a significant change since you started your career and up to now? Like, is it more of, do people talk about that more? Is that more of like with materials and sustainability and, you know, like lead-based paint and all the rest of the stuff that you've had to use? But is that like a significant part of the design plan and the build when you're in the project, is like, you know, more than it used to be in the past?
You know, I think that that's again, mixed answer. There's definitely been a push over the years to use more sustainable products, and there's definitely a push to try and incorporate as much as that of that as we can, and we've definitely tried. At the end of the day, there's always a client who wants something specifically, and so, you know, you can walk in and say, would you rather have a toilet that minimally flushes or actually flushes? And so sometimes those choices
light
get
bulbs
made
that come on straight away or wait to warm up.
Yeah, exactly. And so some of those decisions get made pretty easily outside of your influence. But I think that there's always been a global push to be more sustainable, and even locally building codes and energy codes have adapted and evolved to allow a lot of those things to happen. But again, the client still rules the roost in a lot of that. So you've got latitude up to the codes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's tough to try and incorporate and push things that people aren't willing to want to be passionate about. Right. Because, again, typically if they're wanting to build a building, they've got a mission. They know what they want to do. So, yes, I think we'd love to do more. Sure. How we go about that is, it's definitely an evolution that's I've seen, I feel like, a lot in my little under 20 years of doing this. Will I see more in my next 20? I think we will for sure. The simplest example I can even point to is how fast electric vehicles have been brought into the scene. And we've built car dealerships. Bob Moore's been a client for years, and it's interesting to see even how they're having to evolve their thinking to incorporate electric vehicles into just the infrastructure of supporting them at a dealership.
Right. And that's a huge issue at the moment, isn't it? With that kind of world is that, these cars are great, but do we have the infrastructure to the charging network to be able to charge these, pulling from the grid? And I know back home they don't. Like this, right now it's not feasible, but you have these mega chargers and superchargers that are at the dealerships. I know the Porsche Oklahoma City has one, and it's can charge the car in 30 minutes. But if you plug it into your house, it could take all night.
Right.
But again, that's pulling from the grid, and you need that power source and the ability to have that when you build a building, I guess.
So I think that we'll see probably more of those sustainable things related to electricity probably next, probably more so than will we see recycled woods used in a higher amount. So I think that'll challenge a lot more of the builders because, quite frankly, the more complex the system is, the less a lot of people dig into it, and that's kind of where I've always thrived. Is that if you didn't understand the system, most people would frown away, and I would just dig in deeper.
Yeah, I want to figure this out because late at night it's eating at you while you don't know.
Well, that, and sometimes if the problem is complex that requires maybe outside the box thinking, it's easy when the electrician's the only guy thinking about the electrical problem. But then when you get someone else outside the electrician thinking about it, well, now you can apply some maybe different thoughts to how we solve it. So I've always used that as my kind of one ability to try and get around and explore new ways to solve problems.
Yeah. So you mentioned that when people come to you, they for the most part you're building for a client. They know exactly what they want. Do you guys sometimes have to dive in and be like, I know this is what you want, but this is how this is actually going to work? Because there's two things, isn't there? You have someone coming in who just sees cool drawings and I want my building to look like that, and then your side well, it's not going to stand up for very long if it doesn't. We don't do these things.
The client always gets everything they want.
Of course,
that's the way
you just
that
sneak
works.
in a few different things.
Well, you can almost always boil down projects to there's sacred elements and then there's non-sacred elements. Because obviously every building's got a function to do something. The Arts Center is a great example. It does several major things within the building and is an art piece itself.
Yeah.
Okay, that's easy. But think about other buildings where, we may have designed it to be architecturally interesting, and yet maybe the material that we're trying to use this time is something that's, for whatever reason, maybe it's too expensive to fit the numbers that they want to spend on. And so we will help explore a lot of those things.
Sure.
We have a lot of estimating charrettes where we'll talk through those kind of discussions. What is important in this building? What are the things that we've got to, again, kind of treat with a special kid glove, or can we bring some creative ideas to it and maybe figure out a way to get the architectural design that everybody really loves, but at a lesser cost.
Right.
And so those are also fun, interesting challenges to get into along the way.
Well, there's so many buildings, and people can go to the website and see your work. I'm sure, you've been doing this almost 20 years, and this is just there's so much more to do, isn't it? There's always hopefully going to be work to do, and the city's always growing. Any part of the city that you haven't built stuff in yet that you want to get into?
We've in the last year we've built projects on both the north side and the south side, really east and west. So I think that the things that are interesting to see happen. We just finished last year a multifamily building off Fifth and Lee called the Bower. And that was an interesting project to see come to life because it was right off of the core of downtown, and it was meant to be privately owned homes, but in a kind of condo-style setting. And so it was really interesting to see the city growing in a new way. It's really easy to say, okay, well, we're going to go down off of Fifth and Broadway and do something, because then that's right in the core of where everybody already wants to be. But that kind of expansion of the bubble is interesting to see happen. Because, as I was saying about the far sides of the city, there's all these
pockets, isn't it?
Yeah, you've got almost like more on the south side and, Choctaw on the east. You've got all these little areas that are their own communities of their own self. But to see the central core expand is kind of an interesting thing to happen.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming down and sharing some stories, Matt. This has been, I've loved this. This is super interesting to me because, it's cool to see, and to hear the stories from behind. I didn't know about, the Arts Center and just the building at Hefner with the creeks and just, you don't know about this stuff, right? And this is super cool. I'm sure people listening love that. So for people listening, I guess they can go to the website and see the work that you do. And if there's anyone listening that wants you to do work, that's the best place to contact you.
Absolutely. www.smithandpickel.com. We've got a pretty long list of all the projects that are on there. Mm-hmm. We're getting ready to bring online a map that shows all the projects we touched around town, nice. Which is really kind of a neat thing for us just to see, the growth of the company over the years and the growth of the town. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, I'll post the links down below in the description. You can go to the website and check that out. And thanks for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers. This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Also, huge shout out to RCB Bank for jumping on board to be a sponsor. RCB Bank's loan promotion is here for a limited time. Head into any of their 40 Oklahoma locations to get as low as 1.79 APR on your next car, boat, camper, or ATV. Apply online at rcbbank.com. RCB Bank, that's my bank. Rate and finance with approved credit. Restrictions apply. Member FDIC. Huge shout out to my sponsors. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.